We are now going to transition into our second conversation. As you heard this morning, we are doing three things really different at the REACH Coalition. One, creating a collaboration model across the value chain. And you heard from our speakers before why a new model of collaboration is going to be necessary. And it's an uncomfortable but necessary collaboration. We also said that the voice of the farmer is going to be critical for this transformation to take place. And today I have with me 4 outstanding producers that were identified by their respective bureaus. So we asked our Illinois Farm Bureau colleagues who are at the table, members of the coalition, we'd love to have a producer that you think could speak authentically, clearly, forcefully on this topic. And we have Steve that is representing our Illinois producers. And then we have a long-standing relationship with Garrett and his organization at the Farm Bureau. And you'll hear in a second their stories, but Garrett is a producer himself. His day job and his non-day job are one and the same, which is producing on the farm. And he and his team identified Addie and Bryant as 2 producers that would represent a powerful and unique voice. So I'd love to get into this conversation by having them introduce themselves in the most comprehensive way. And I'm going to set the stage by having Garrett be the one who introduces himself through the lens of the producer that you are.
Okay. Well,
Garrett?
thank you, Vijay, and thank you to all of you for being here today. My name is Garrett Hawkins. I'm a 5th-generation farmer from Appleton City, Missouri. So my family, we farm an hour and a half south of downtown Kansas City. Our county is one of the areas where the Ozarks meet the prairie. And so we've got a great mix of what I would call traditional Midwest agriculture. I'm actually the 3rd generation to live on and operate the acres where my family resides today. We're a beef cattle operation primarily. I say that because we have row crop acres, and frankly, the young farmer down the road can do it better than me. So I rent those acres to him while I'm able to focus on our cow-calf operation. And I have 3 children that I hope will become the 6th generation and the 4th generation to own and operate these acres someday.
Thank you, Garrett. I want you all in the audience to remember 5th and 3rd. That's his numbers. I want you to remember that. Addie?
I'm Addie Yoder. I am a farmer in Northeast Missouri in Shelby County. We grow corn and soybeans on my husband's family farm. He's the 3rd generation in Shelby County. His grandpa was Amish and came from Illinois in the 50s and established our farm. So there's farmers in there that I don't even know about. So, but on our farm now, he's the 3rd generation. My son is 10. We have 4 kids, but he is a full-time farmer at 10, and so he very proudly considers himself the 4th generation and is moving forward every day to operate all that big machinery. We grow corn and soybeans. We have a crop insurance agency. The farm has a cattle backgrounding operation. We aren't financially invested in it because my husband prefers not to work cattle, but he gets to anyway. The kids have a sweet corn patch in the summer that we sell all over. Sometimes we come down here, sometimes we go to Columbia, and that's a lot of fun. And the thing that I missed in our bio is that we were honored in 2020 to be the Leopold Conservation Award winner for the state of Missouri. And so that's our big shining moment of we got a 5-minute video.
Thank you, Addie. You remember her statistics and her numbers, right? 3rd generation, 4th generation already in the works. And running a crop insurance company, got 4 or 5 things going on, not just one thing. So thank you, Addie. Bryant?
Yeah, my name's Bryant Kagi, and I'm a 4th generation farmer in Northwest Missouri near the little town of Maysville. I farm with my dad, and my grandfather at 86 is still active and involved every day on the farm, sometimes more than we would like him to be. We raise corn, soybeans, we have a cow-calf herd, and then we also finish beef cattle and a feedlot operation, fairly vertically integrated. We own most of the land we farm, so we do place a real emphasis on soil health, erosion control, reduction, and trying to make the land better than when we got it. Excited to be here, excited for the opportunity.
Great, thank you, Brian. Steve?
Yeah, Steve Turner from Illinois, of course, and they say I had to think when you're going through your bios there, I had to think when I stood up before, I've always said third generation, and I thought, I am wrong. My son's farm with me now. We are fourth generation now, okay? I better start, so I got to go back and tell them that, or they would have told Dad, what's wrong with you, you know? We're back here doing things so you can be here talking today, okay? So it's just, but no, seriously, my wife Lori and I were fortunate enough to have our two sons, and I'll say integrated in the farming operation. If you would have asked us a few years ago, they were working their way in, doing those things young producers do to get involved in the farming operation. I'd say here today, they're probably fully engaged in it right now, okay? Which means they've got just as much involved, dollars and cents, decision-making, everything, and what Dad does too. I will say we're a very diversified operation. We're located about 45 miles northwest of Springfield. And we raise traditional, what we say in our area, corn, soybeans, wheat, but with about half our farm is irrigated sand with center pivot irrigation. We've been watering for, my father-in-law started out, and I kind of say the patriarch of our farm, he was one of the pioneer irrigators in the county back in the 50s and 60s that started that. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but I can tell you back then that was. We utilize those irrigations to raise specialty crops. Popcorn is one of ours. We raise a lot of popcorn. And we also raise processing green beans and pumpkins beyond the other. And we also raise corn and soybeans also under that. We use a lot of cover crops. One other thing said here, we're not as strong as livestock as explained here. We do have a cow-calf herd. Then I'll just close by saying, as we get going here, one thing we're doing here, and I'll share with you here, it's our second year, we have really picked some fields out and we're trying bio-farming. Anybody ever heard bugs in a jug before? Things like that. This will be our second year we've picked some out and trying that. I mean, the full phase of it. And all I can say is it's a learning process, but and we're trying out here, but there's quite a big curve to go right there. So glad to be here today.
Great. So the reason why I wanted you all to pay attention to their stories is I've been on so many conferences and grower panels, and when the growers would tell their story, I'd be like, yeah. When I was doing a prep call with them, I realized for the first time two things. One, who do you think is vested in the idea that this land needs to be here for another 4 to 5 generations? Us here, city slickers, or them? I realized that myself 3 days ago, that I had not been thinking about this correctly. Who is vested in that land? And the land is a metaphor for who is vested in that life of the community that surrounds that land. Us making these big promises to our shareholders about regenerative agriculture, but no sense of place. We keep moving around, 5 years here, 7 years here. There is no place that ties us like it ties our producer friends. So I wanted you all to just hold that thought as we have this conversation about the incredible disconnect between the one group that should absolutely get regenerative agriculture and actually gets it and is made to feel like they don't. We're going to talk about that. So Garrett, I learned from you. Producers are the ultimate conservationists. Common sense conservation programs are what you do all day long. So then tell me, why is this regen concept such a disconnect for you all as the way it's coming to you? Right?
Well, yes, and thank you for the question, BJ. And first, to the innovators in the room, thank you for choosing agriculture, to use your talent, to use your expertise, to want to help us do more. I think that's awesome. So thank you, first and foremost. And VJ, whether it's regenerative, organic, natural. I think for those of us who farm or ranch, throughout our lifetimes, we hear these terms, okay? They're coming at us all the time. They're constantly shifting. And now that we're in the regen and climate space, what I hear every day from my fellow farmers is we were climate smart before being climate smart was cool, okay? We have been adapting. I didn't expect that, but I feel like I'm on Oprah or something. So we hear all these things, but being climate smart and being innovative is inherent to what we do every day on the farm. I was telling Steve, I remember as a kid sitting at the kitchen table with Grandpa, and he would always, as he was eating breakfast, he would scratch out finances on the back of a Post Toasty box. And I remember him talking about just during his time how much agriculture had changed. And as a 7-year-old, he was behind a team of 2 horses and a plow, working ground, and he figured out that he would have walked 11 miles a day as a 7-year-old. And to think when he passed away at age 89, how much agriculture had changed. And it was all because farmers are inherently optimists and farmers are inherently innovators, okay? So when we hear all of this about what all we have to do, sometimes we just want folks to pause with us and give thanks for the blessings that we have and to be appreciative of how far we've come. I mean, I could literally bore you with all the statistics of how much better we are over the past 70 years, right? And when I look at Addie and Jocelyn and their recognition with the Leopold Award for conservation, all these things are inherent to what we do, okay? So if we can start from a point of appreciation. Another point is we hear from our corporate partners, the goals, whether it's net zero, all of these things. We want you to feel good, but at the same time, you feeling good isn't driving me every day on the farm. What drives me every day is the notion that I want to bring the kids home. And I think for my fellow panelists, we want nothing more than to be able to pass the farm on to the next generation. So when I hear you talk about sustainability is personal to each one of us as farmers or ranchers. My personal definition of sustainability is being able to pass the farm on. That will mean that I've been productive, profitable, that I've stewarded the resources. Yes, we just finished a rotational grazing system to better manage our forage. And ultimately, I will have instilled a work ethic and a passion in my kids that they want to be the next. So I hear you, I hear these words, but just know these words are also personal to us, and they are defined by wanting to pass on the legacy of the farm. Mm-hmm. So just know, we want to do more, and we're open to doing more, but it also has to make sense within each and every one of our farming operations as to what we can do, how fast we can do it. And then finally, I'd say this, VJ, that our farm and ranch families are inseparable from the communities in which we live and work, okay? So not only are we worried about our farm and stewarding the resources, but we're also worried about having enough money to put in the offering plate on Sundays. We want to make sure that when a family is in need in the community, that you better believe it's the farmer next door that's the first to offer up a hog for a hog roast, or it's the other neighbor who's putting together a fundraiser. So inherently, we are intertwined with our communities from a service standpoint, and we want to give back to make sure that we have adequate schools, good infrastructure, thriving small business, and access to health care, all of these things. So we hear you. We appreciate what you bring to the table from us, but we also just know these terms are personal to each and every one of us as well.
Wow. Appreciation. Mac used the word respect. You brought another word, appreciation. How many times do we show up and start the conversation with, we appreciate all that you have done for us? Thank you for reminding us of that. And then the second thing was, it's really personal for you all. This is not something that is an academic concept. This is about the livelihood, your families, your communities. That's what this means. So we'll come back and talk about the disconnect between regenerative agriculture in the corporate world and what does regenerative agriculture look like on the farm. And if we can bring those two together, there should be no daylight on this issue. Addie, love to have you build on what Garrett just said about why is there this disconnect between what is inherently a culture of regeneration.
Well, I want to start out by saying this award sounds really fancy, and it is cool, and it is fancy. But the thing that Jocelyn and I had to realize when we got the award is that we're not doing anything that Bryant isn't doing or that Garrett isn't doing. We just wrote a paper about it and submitted the application. So we're all doing the same things, and we all have the same goal. We just put it on paper. That's the difference right there. I mean, I'm going to second exactly what Garrett said, that sustainability, when that term first came about, I do a lot of consumer engagement personally. I volunteer for different organizations, and I talk about corn on the internet all the time. I have conversations about corn and the farm with people off the farm all across the world, really. And these terms come up, right? Sustainability and climate change and regenerative ag, and we sort through them at our house. Okay, what does this mean? What does this one mean today? And even when we got sample questions of what we could talk today, Jocelyn and I sat down and we were like, all right, if I'm sorting through this, what does that actually look like for us? And it's exactly what Garrett said. It's that we are deeply invested in that soil. It's that we're growing a crop, but we also want to grow a crop next year and the year after that, and we want it to get better. Because we do have to grow more food on the same amount of space, because there's more people, and they're all kind of like our children, right? Like, that was my big comparison when I was going through this stuff, is that farming and parenting are almost hand in hand, right? Like, I have 4 children and Bryant has 3. And we do things with those 7 kids completely different, each individually in a different location. And our fields and our farms are the same way. Every field that we farm has been tested. So I know that I have to handle this one way and that one another. And that's part of what we're investing in and what we want to maintain so that we can grow more. And it's exciting to us to be able to do that. And so it's almost like a challenge. My husband says that the first day of planting is like opening day of baseball, because you have all of this potential and no idea what's going to happen. And so we get really fired up about that and want to do the best we can so that we can win the World Series of farm production, right? So sustainability is just one of those things that we do, and for it to have a title that changes all the time, it doesn't really mean a lot. We're like, okay, cool, glad you're on our team. We're gonna keep moving forward.
So Addie, so how does it look weird and strange that folks are using these terms?
Say that again.
Does it look weird and strange, these terms that are being thrown at you, regenerative, climate smart? I'd love to have the audience hear how you'll hear that.
Yeah, I mean, we know that we're all kind of working
Does it sound
toward the
like
same
some
direction.
kind of?
We just keep doing it anyway.
So does it sound like, what are you guys talking about? Does it sound like, so I think it's a new way of farming, right? And we are trying to urge that we need to move to a new way of farming. And you're saying, but we're already doing it.
Yes, and kind of having fun with it at the same time.
So what advice do you have to us who are working in these corporate worlds, making these promises? What advice do you have for how should we be actually communicating with you? Brian, I want you to jump in with this hard question, because I really want to have them get the answer of how you should be communicated with.
You know, that's an interesting question. And, you know, when I think about the terms regenerative agriculture, sustainability, like I envision what the general public thinks of that as, well, we don't want farming to be this large scale industry like it is today. We want to step back 100 years and have goats and sheep grazing and little patches of crops. But what they miss on that is that outcome based, that wasn't very productive. It might have had better outcomes for soil health and for some environmental standards, but we didn't produce near what we can produce today. So when I look at it from our operation, it's like, yes, I want to do better in all those areas, but we also have to keep that production forefront of mind. And regenerative is going to look different than it would have 100 years ago, and it has to. And I just think those definitions, there's really a disconnect in what modern agriculture has to do. And I've read books by regenerative producers, and I think their system works for them, but they're producing niche products, selling them into specialty markets. That works on a very small scale, but that's not how you feed the world. And I think we have to keep that in mind, that we have to have solutions that provide, better climate sustainability outcomes while still being highly productive, because we have to. And if our operation isn't highly productive, it's going to come back to hurt that next generation that won't have much of an operation to step into.
Wow. Thank you for that great answer. Steve, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I'll try to build on that, because I think when I look back at my farming community, and first of all, on my intro, we select fields we're doing this with. We're not doing this over every acre. I think that's pretty evident right there. And do we always select right? No. But we adapt and we change. I like to say, I don't look at it as much when our sons are involved or deciding this. It's not a wrong decision. It's how we're going to adapt to make it work. And sometimes you adapt and it still doesn't. But my point I want to make is this: the disconnect. And maybe you've heard this before. If you have, I'm sorry. I'm going to throw something back to you. What I'm doing now is working. Why would I want to change it? It's worked. It continues to work. Now, I'll throw another challenge to you. I think the farmer saying that could say that very strongly 2 years ago. If he's honest with you, we are honest, if he'll share with you right now, I will say this year, I looked coming down here today, I think I've got a corn price looking at me at $4 in front of it. Last year that had a 6, even had capabilities of 7. My point's this: economics drive our changes sometimes, whether we like it or not. And I think some of those economics we're at right now can be seized a little bit on it, because some of the things I've tried and done, I can tell you from an economic standpoint, it's got my attention. I'm not saying I'm doing more everywhere with less, but I'm trying to do it with less, and that's my bottom line right there, okay? And I think maybe there's an opportunity here right now, I just share with you to think about that purely by the economics. And I'll just close by saying one of the things when you look at agriculture, and it got done without a lot of fanfare, without a lot done, was in the mid-'80s. Now the mid-'80s was a tough time in agriculture. Farmers were going broke, good farmers. You had $1.50 corn. My point's this, and I'm not pushing heavy-handed government, but look at that period. That's when we had to say, if you want to receive the subsidy and the support of the government, you've got to start controlling your soil erosion. I thought at that time, oh my gosh, farmers are about as anti-government regulation, they're even stronger today, and they are. They adapted and they did it. But I'm going to tell you, we're conservationists and we take care of the ground. You've heard that very well here. But the economics helped drive that. You didn't have a choice if you wanted to stay in business, okay? So don't know if that's a different perspective for you or not, but I think right now the economic times can maybe be a benefit as you're trying to come out here and do it that way. Because I can grant you, everybody's starting to feel the pinch out here.
Great point. When things are good, it's hard to convince a producer to do anything different. But when things are difficult, if you show up with some really good solutions, that's your window of opportunity. So love to have you all, again, in a way that's not being heard, describe what solutions you're looking for that are actually going to tell you that I will be able to leave my farm for the next 1 or 2 or 3 generations. I don't want it to be a today answer. I want it to be an answer that goes across time. What is it that you're looking for that will allow you to have this multi-generation play? Because that is what it's going to take. It's not going to, our agriculture system is not going to become regenerative in the next 10 years. It's going to take multi-generations. So
I'll take that first,
Yeah.
and then let everybody else please, because with, I call it our farm base expanding into the farm, And we've not figured out a way on this, and I don't think it will. It's going to take expansion, okay? It's going to take more, whether it's in the livestock area, the acres we're farming, things like that, I think, to keep doing that. The challenge with that's going to be, as I look forward here, is we do it and we keep trying to figure out the regenerative part, the agriculture, the cover crop side of it and that. We're kind of experiencing that right now. It takes more time, acres, labor to do this and get it done. I'm gonna say get it done right, okay? You can throw cover crop seed out there or you can establish it right, okay? There's a heck of a difference in the way I farm right there. So to sum my answer up, I think it's just finding out how to grow the farming operation and bring all that into it. And I'll add one more thing. I have a lot of cash rent landlords. There are some I will not do this on. I won't do it on. Because you know why? I haven't got them convinced yet. And if I don't convince them right, there's a neighbor down there that will farm that ground for them. That's the tough one right there, or I think it is.
That's interesting. Brian, do you want to talk about,
Yeah.
what would you like to see happen where if somebody were willing to be a partner to make you more regenerative in the definition of regenerative we've been talking about for our families and our land to keep going?
Sure, I think the way we continue to manage our farm at a more intricate detail, more intensive as far as variable rate seeding, variable rate fertility, making sure inputs get placed where they need to go. But what's so frustrating to me is there's still so much we don't understand about soil health, soil biology. When we're grid sampling a field on 2.5 acre grids, like I've been the one to pull the soil cores, and I can stand in this spot and say, if I pulled these soil cores right over there, the results would be totally different. And we've got to be able to manage that on a much higher resolution basis, because I don't think our variable rate's really doing near as much as it can. But all that being said, I think our operations, we're not these highly advanced corporations that I don't have a chief technology officer that can look at all these different new technology opportunities and tell me which ones to do. Just in the past week, I've been HR manager, truck driver, payroll, equipment, mechanic. I've done all that myself, so I don't have time to listen to every sales pitch and try to figure out how can I integrate that into my business, especially in a space that's moving so quickly. By the time I have the time to integrate something into my business, it might have changed, it might have moved. There may be a different player that's really a better option. So I need things simplified. It's got to be a really clear ROI, but I read through some of the innovator bios, and I'm excited about that technology. It has to work and it has to be easy, and I have to see that return on investment pretty quick, because I'm being asked to reduce my inputs, but what's going to say if I start to do that in 5 years I don't start to see negative impacts from that it's going to take years to recover from it. There's always that risk.
And that's
right?
one thing we're at right now, very beginning that. And I guess, for me with my son's younger, I guess Dad's going to look at it from this perspective. Let's just see 3, 4, 5 years. We don't wake in there where we've done something that we got to build back up in the soil right there. Okay?
Yeah.
Because we know how hard as producers that is when that happens.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to interject that there.
That was all I had.
Addie, you want to chime in on that?
Well, I wanted, if it's okay, I wanted to piggyback a little bit off of what you said about time and researching things. That is why I've heard the word trust mentioned several times just since last night, that we've got to maintain trust and we've got to build trust. And within farming, trust is so important because some of those innovative decisions come from relationships. If I know that Bryant has tried something and we had a conversation about it, I put weight in that. And I'm going to ask Garrett if he's done the same thing, and we're going to have a conversation. And that means a lot more to me than somebody coming and saying, hey, I got this cool new product, because this matters. When we make choices on what we purchase, it's oftentimes not based on the product, but based on the person selling it. And that is so important in this room too, is that when these innovations come through, that trust piece, we have to feel like you value our time and our resources and our history and what we're doing. Otherwise, we can't make sound decisions based off of just a minute's worth of information.
Thank you for that great build on how you'll actually make these very difficult decisions It's not by somebody giving you incredible data that you don't trust. It starts with who you trust, and then the information follows second. And one of the mistakes we make in our ecosystem of innovation is we all believe it's the data, and which is really important. If you don't have the data, to Brian's point, it's not going to live in the real world, it's going to get wiped out. So you got to have it, but it is not sufficient. And so we've only done half the job when we finished all our work inside our startups, when we got the data. The next is, how are you going to earn the trust of all of you? And so really, really happy that you are sharing some of these things. Garrett, anything you want to add through this lens of what is it that you're looking for, and you'll be able to immediately grab onto and say, this is what I need to keep you going for another 2-3 generations.
VJ, I'm real simple. I just want more pounds of beef leaving the farm. Like, I mean, really. I want to be more efficient with the acres that I have. Like, coming up with more land, being able to rent or buy more land is hard. So I'm trying to figure out, like many others, how do we maximize the acres that we have and do good, right? So that's why we made the step of cost sharing with USDA to put in a rotational grazing system to see if we can do better in how we manage our forage. But frankly, you look at Missouri and just the makeup of agriculture, the beef cattle industry is a huge part of Missouri. And we are known for forage. And frankly, I get excited when innovators talk about forage technology and how we can do better, about how we care for our animals, how we can better steward our resources, and yes, have more pounds of beef leaving the farm. So I get excited about that. But I also get excited about the fundamentals. And you mentioned common sense conservation, and that's something that we are really passionate about. And there's nothing more frustrating that we hear, especially in Washington, D.C., lawmakers and regulators want to put more conservation on the ground, but it only works if farmers are willing to walk through the door of their USDA service center and partner with them with their own dollars. And what we have found, BJ, in Missouri, 2 years of drought, okay? It has taken a toll. And what we've been trying to do are focus on-farm resilience and practices that make sense. So Missouri has more farm ponds than any other state in the country. But yet many of them were built by our grandfathers decades ago. And they could use some rehabilitation work. And you would not believe the red tape that we've ran into in trying to access cost share dollars just to do basic conservation work. Because guess what? If I can hold more runoff in that storage structure, I also have hopefully more water during a time of drought that I can tap into when needed. So I love pie in the sky innovation, but also don't forget that we as farmers just want to focus on the fundamentals and get the fundamentals right too. And that's being more resilient during drought or when we experience weather variability. I mean, let's face it, no 2 seasons, no 2 years are alike. So be thinking about technologies that help us also to become more resilient in how we steward our resources.
Fantastic.
So I'm pretty basic, VJ, really.
Whoa. Basic is what we want it to be. So audience, I've got 3-4 minutes. If there's a really deep and compelling question, yes, Rick, go for it.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm glad to see family farm. My wife is 5th generation farm in Texas, so I get everything you're saying. So love the family farm, but the percentage and the number of acres that are going to non-landowner farmers is increasing all the time. And I've been talking with them, and for them to get on board with regenerative ag or carbon indices is difficult for them because getting more than a 1-year contract on that land is almost impossible. And by the time they come up and really can harvest that money and those credits, somebody can come in and swoop and outbid them for that land and spend 1 year, high dollar part. So how do we fix that? Because that section of farming is getting bigger and bigger every day.
Great question. Steve, you want to?
I think you probably explained the economics out here very well, okay? And part of my background I gave right there, as I share with you, I have landlords in that situation. And I'd like to be able to give you an answer, because that's about the 5th or 6th time I've heard that come up. And I don't think there is an answer on some of it except attrition. I look at several of those landlords, I'll have a bigger situation to deal with one of these days than that when they pass away, and what will happen to that farm after that. You might not realize, but I always think at it lots of times on the farming in our area, lots of times that happens, it's pretty tough for that current operator, even if they have a great relationship, to hold on to that farm, okay? The carbon credits like that, I'll just try to say, and it's a real broad answer that doesn't do it, there's got to be some flexibility like that. And you know what? Maybe that doesn't go the full route that you wanted to see that happen, but come on, that's succession. It's changing. Now, when that changes, that might be a time right there, okay? But, and with that, I think you got to realize too, and I'll close with this, being in Illinois, I'm not too far from, we don't have very much of it, some of the blackest prime dirt you can find in central Illinois. Those are probably the least adapters of things, in my opinion, what I see. I'm not being negative about them. It's just, it keeps working for them, and it works very well, okay? And, you know, how do you come back? And I guess if you answer that question, I think you'll answer that one there. And I'll be interesting what the other have to say on that, because it's a tough one.
I don't have a great answer. I mean, that is a challenge, and we deal with very few landlords, but that relationship is a difficult one, you know, for us on what we're willing to invest long-term. And for them, a lot of times they don't see the benefit in these long-term. They've got much more defined end game for the family farm, right? They're gonna get what they can off of it until it's time to sell. I think these solutions that are being offered in innovation have to keep in mind that these market dynamics are very complicated, especially when you're dealing with that landlord-operator relationship. But ultimately, I just have a lot of faith that if something makes financial sense and is the right move, that it will eventually catch hold and take off. But there's probably a higher bar to proving that in those situations where you know, non-farm landowners are present.
Addy, anything you want to add? Garrett?
On the landowner pressure with carbon credits and.
I didn't hear it.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yes, no. Tough one. I mean, because it's not only, when I think about absentee landowners and the whole notion of investing in carbon sequestering practices, in Missouri and many states, we're also dealing with the pressure of use of those acres for renewable energy. You know, we see increasing pressure and competition for solar, for instance. And you're talking about taking prime farmland out of production to put under solar panel for 30 to 50 years. And so when you talk about some of these landowners, they have to look at it not just for themselves as a 401k, but they're looking at that type of endeavor as generational for their kids and grandkids. So we certainly have challenges as we think about how we maximize the opportunity that we have looking ahead in agriculture. I don't have a good answer for these things. Like, that's why there are organizations like Farm Bureau as a convener to try to bring at least our farmers and other members together to talk about these things. And certainly that's why, BJ, I appreciate BioSTL being a convener and giving us a chance to be a part of this conversation.
Well, thank you so much.
You're all about education. This is an education process, and it's going to take a while for that landlord you just defined to get educated on that. Let's face it.
Wow, that is a great question. Oh, you have one more? I think we are only a minute. We only have a minute, so I'm gonna frustrate you by not being able to take your question. I'm so sorry.
I have the
Because
I have
I
the microphone here, so
Oh.
I got there first.
Johnny, I want to keep on time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because here's the reason why, gang. We have another session on the Innovator Playbook. It's got 20 minutes, and I really want you all to have the time to hear that conversation. So I want to end this with a very simple question for all of you. Don't have to answer it, just take the question. I hope, it's not a question now as I think about it, it's a hope. I hope that what you heard today was a different conversation about where they are on this topic, where our farmers are on this topic, and hopefully something about how we need to shift our thinking about how we engage with producers. Because as we talked about in our first session, and as the heart of the coalition, there is no regenerative ag happening if it doesn't work for them. So let's do it together with this more enhanced appreciation for how y'all want to be heard, appreciation for the work that you've already done, and the recognition that only a partnership with innovators in you all is going to take us to the next level. So with that, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the panel.
Thank you.